welcome back to the Board Drill Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kyle. Here with me tonight is our special guest, Coach Dan Gonzalez, who played for Texas and then coached in college for 10 years and is now the creator of readandshoot.com. He works with a lot of football programs, nationwide, does some consulting. And so we're excited to have him on tonight. Coach, welcome to the Board Drill. So how are we doing tonight, Coach?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, to kind of preface this episode, people always ask, how we meet people and things. Well, one night we didn't have a guest and I literally just tweeted out who wants to talk ball. And, to my surprise, I get a DM from you, Coach, and we hopped on together and we had a really, really good conversation. And some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, we talked about. And for me, it was one of those things that was the obvious thing that I need to do in my coaching career that I didn't notice. Is my best way to describe it. I was like, wow, how have I not done that before? So I'm really excited to have you on tonight. I'm not gonna give it away before we get started, but Coach, it's a pleasure to have you on. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen and we can get rolling on it.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
While he's sharing our screen, just a reminder to like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Follow us on our social media on TikTok and Twitter. We're at Board Drill, and follow us at our website, boarddrill.com. Subscribe for weekly articles.
I did that correctly?
Hey, hold on one second, Coach. Matt, man, on the podcast tonight. How we doing? Coming on a little late?
I'm alive and kicking.
There we go. So, all right, we're back. Sorry about that. Matt actually hopped on the podcast. We're super excited to have him back. He came off of an illness, so we're glad to have him back. Coach Gonzalez, I apologize for the interruption, but let's get rolling. I'm excited about this.
Not a problem at all. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, when we talked the other night, I don't even remember how long ago it was. It was something I've been working on, but it's something that I've done for several years now. And so what it is it's an alternative to scripting and kind of just having things, a lot of the things that I try to do and that I think that coaches could benefit from is, number one, saving time, but also saving reps. Okay, so I call them axioms. What we do is we make sure that, from the very first time we start game planning, as soon as, if you play on a Friday, you come in, you grade the previous game, and then you start on the next opponent, that you already start building these things, and that's what an axiom is. So I'm just gonna kind of go, and so even I had to look it up initially, right? So it's a statement or a proposition that's regarded as a self-truth. It's something that I know there's a lot of things now, but you can usually say the sky is blue, water's wet, right? And those things that don't really need proof or evidence, right? So if you're in an offensive system, though, all right, what we want to do is, for us, we're talking about schematic truths. All right, we're talking about that if we execute these things, all right, then, and these principles and conditions are met, you'll have done your part on your side of the ball, for winning the game. And so, wanted to, several years ago, Brian Billick had his game planning thing, and I was a young coach at the time, and they break down situations and the 125% rule and all that kind of stuff. And really and truly, it's really hard to do it that way. And I actually, if you think about it, it's really not really good teaching. If you look at who's really good in 2-minute situations, why is that? Well, it's because they run their base stuff. It's like their day one install stuff. And you'd be amazed how many people's cut-ups I go through, because I tear through a lot of video, and I never see their day one install stuff in games. Right. So if you can imagine that kind of thing, it just kind of helps bring things into focus. All right. So for us, we're going to define 5 in each game. basically 5 building blocks, if you will, and it's going to set the foundation for every play that goes in the game plan. All right, and then these things have to be specific. So, when we talk about, I was very careful about saying, like in that second bullet there, schematic truths. Like we all know, right, that if you don't turn the ball over and you get more explosives, right, you've got a whatever 91% chance of win. Everybody knows that, and that's not what I'm talking about, because then you could just say score one more point than and then you walk away, right? You're done. So here we want to talk about really specific things within a system. All right, and you can, as we go through this, you can see how you can get a lot of different views from people on your staff. Even though you might be the coordinator or the person in charge of that side of the ball, you'll have the final decision. But I think I've put something together that we'll show you how we apply it, how it's come about, and then maybe something that people could find useful, right? So applications, right? Basically, every play has a reason for being in the game plan. And I always, when I was a young coach, and you mentioned my playing career at Texas, I was lucky enough to play for a guy who was an NFL head coach who learned offense, or a lot of the offense, from Tom Landry. So, the New York, the Manhattan-sized phone book, playbook type thing. And so you were putting in a whole bunch of plays, and that's just how you thought it was run until you run into people who are really, really good on offense, with supposedly less talent. You could see it all the time in football, right? Who's more comfortable doing things, all that kind of stuff. But the main thing is have a reason for being in the game plan. We could write up, 50 different cover two passes, but what can you execute and what is good for your people? And so I think we think about it this way, right? We make players earn the right to be in the game, or we should. You got a good team, you're going to have to earn the right to get on the field. So why not that way with play calls? All right.
It's a very good point right there.
I mean, we just throw stuff up, and like, but my gosh, to get Johnny in on the third kickoff unit is like, and I know, politics aside, but we're really, really stingy about the people we put in the game. We should be that way about the calls that go on the sheet. So rather than simply scripting a set of plays or a set number, I think it's truly critical that the focal points remain the forefront of the game plan. You'll see as I get into here, there'll be times when things aren't working and you look at your sheet and it's just print on a card. It's not anything. So what this is designed to do is to really, really hone in on why are we putting it in? Why are we practicing it? And then therefore, in times when things aren't going well, also, you can go back to things in real time and get calls in that can help you turn things around. Like I said, we've got 5 of them. So what I do is there's a spot, and I'll show you what it looks like on the back card of my game plan, where there's 30 open field calls. Rather than scripting 1 through 30 or whatever, we'll break them down. There's just spots, and I'll also talk about how we rationalize. How'd you get to this number? I know some people do. I know there's some people that do, 28, won't go past 28, all that kind of stuff. But there is a rationale for it, and it's data driven. Like a lot of things, people that know me will know that if you can drive the data, then it's worth looking at. All right, so going to give you a little example. All right, just to take you through, and kind of the easiest way for me to explain this is to show like kind of how we do this. So in our quarterback manual, right? So cover 4, these are study questions, right? And you could see the list. It's pretty generic stuff, but there's specific things that we look at, right? And from there we can derive conclusions, right? How much does the running back affect the drops of the backers. Like, is the back to you or away from you? Do they push or open a certain way? That kind of thing. So, these are basic things, but we really want to get down to looking at specific pieces of the defense, because a lot of the way we read stuff, cover fours acknowledges the zone coverage, but within that, there's a lot of man-to-man principles. There's a lot of isolations that can be gained. And so, I just picked this out. It's relevant to the rest of the presentation, but you can just kind of see this is where we will start deriving, what really works for us, what's gonna go into the plan, how do we answer and put things in. So like, how do you decide which 5 things, right? And I'll kind of take you through kind of an imaginary game plan. I had a pretty good defensive team in my mind. I'm not going to name them or whatever, but I'll give you characteristics and kind of for both my team, for the offensive team that this is, hypothetically based on, and the defensive team that's being faced. So I hope that,
now, do we get to guess the defensive team at the end?
Sure, you can. I mean, but I just, how it is. People get offended.
Yeah, I know. I'm just messing with you.
But you can. Well, when we stop recording, we can guess. But we'll go into it. So here's how we get the numbers, right? So I showed you this, Coach, last time by situation. And again, these are pretty generic, but also I checked them and they're not far off. Like you referenced, I've had a lot of consulting clients over the last 12 years that I've done this all across the country. And these, when they're really rolling, right, even with a high school clock, these kinds of things still hold true. So, this is assuming something. It's not like a crazy like college football offense averaging 100 plays. We're talking about 74 plays, 72 to 74 plays. Now, there are always things that you're going to prepare for. I think in today's football, for example, at the very bottom, you better have some 2-point plays, right? You gotta have those and practice those. You'll see where we get kind of the delineation of down and distances, and you'll see where we borrow things, but you'll see, kind of right at that top where there's dedicated slots, usually 41 possession and 10 or open field, regular first or second down calls are in there. And so, from that's kind of how these spots, how that 30, there's some plays that you really like that you're going to call twice. There's some things obviously that overlap, and you're going to see that the more things overlap, then it means it's a pretty good play for you that week, probably. So, that is something that I want to focus on, but just wanted to kind of give you kind of just a real, one way of taking a look at things by situation. And then,
Coach, real quick, slide back to that. I love this sheet. And I don't know how many coaches out there, if you're listening, try to take some time to hop on YouTube and look at this. I mean, Coach literally has it broken down by the correct me if I'm wrong. This is the average number of times you would see like this down at this situation, if you will.
Right.
And so this is a really good thing to look at, even as a defensive coach, of saying like, how are my play calls built? Am I too worried about certain down and distances and things like that? Right. We know where the bulk of that is. And then where your special teams come in. Coach, I think this alone right here is something that a coach should do, at least on average, right? Maybe the year before or halfway through the year, one of the self-scout, bye week things that you do, those activities, on bye week that you should be doing, breaking down what the average number of plays and what the situations are, because, I've actually never done this before quite like this, but I love this, Coach. I think this would be a huge part of a self-scout on a bye week than to build play call sheets going into the, that stretch, the final stretch of the year. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. Cause one of the things that I've had to do during my coaching evolution was use a wristband, because it does limit you. Because otherwise you're like, the West Coast offense, and you're putting 200 play calls on a sheet, and it's dumb, right? And also, the next sheet will kind of tell you how I kind of narrow that down. But you'll see, for example, the third and 2 to 3, you might get 2 of them in a game, right? So you might as well borrow them from somewhere else. I mean, if you don't have a lot of faith in what you're running, your game plan running the football, for example, or your sprint out passing game, then really and truly, I mean, like you need to probably reevaluate a lot of things, and that certainly was true for me a long time ago, and I think it's useful now.
Yeah. Matt, what do you run on 3rd and 2 to 3?
Power.
Yeah, that's
I
what
mean,
thought.
power for any one of these situations. I mean, right?
I know.
You can run
Absolutely.
power on 3rd and 13 plus. Like it applies to everything.
It absolutely does. Just
That's
like
what
four
happens when we
verticals
bring an
does.
O-line coach in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I'm totally like that. So anyway, so by situation, this is what it looks like. And then if you take it a different way, the math by play type, assuming 74 calls, and assuming that you're like a wide open offense, right? You're gonna throw it. You're not like crazy, throwing it 70 times a game, right? But so you see there, sort of trying to find balance, not dominant enough to run it down people's throats all the time. Really, kind of what I know well is kind of in the quick rhythm passing game and trying to stay on time. And I've got a lot of thoughts on that. But you see here, kind of what it is. But so in this second set of bullets in the light blue, the quick rhythm drop back, if you're going to get 25 calls, because 25 runs in RPOs, 9 vertical flood shots. And so you're blending all these, you're based on the notes that I had in the previous, based on situations, right? This is what you're getting to. So look at this right underneath that. So you're talking about 5, what I call 90 percenters, meaning not only is it a pretty sure completion, but you want to try to derive an explosive if possible from it, right? So it's not just on stop routes. I mean, and unless there's some people who are really, really lucky with a guy that they can throw smoke screens to, an average 15 yards a completion,
Yeah.
right? So we're not talking about that. But then 5 pure, what I call a pure progression. So you're talking about having a defined 10 spots, and when you see my calls, the game board, these are slots. These are play calls. You might change a couple things in the formation, but unless it's the same for a whole lot of people, running the same thing out of 2 different personnel groupings is 2 things, right? So if you're you take any given route combination, when you start asking most people start practicing it with their best receiver, for example, running the middle read, the bender, middle vertical, whatever you want to call it. But then if you do the combination to where that guy moves out of there, and then you go from 10 personnel to 11, and now it's an H-back tight end guy running it, it might be just as effective, if not more in some cases. But that's a different set of these are practice problems that we are trying to solve for. So this is the way I did it, and the way we backed out of it was, how much practice time do I have, right? And assuming what everybody's normal week is, of going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday is really whether you do it Wednesday or Thursday, the glorified walkthrough kind of thing. It's not a real football practice with live reps. Then you play the game on Friday, right? So that's kind of what this basically we're trying to say. What can we practice if in every 5-minute period we can get 8 plays? It's pretty brisk, but it's not just insane, right? To where you can't practice it if you have a small squad, right? And so these are constraints that kind of, when you start thinking about that and you're really trying to be fair, this is the best I can come up with. And so in that light blue column, you're talking about 5 of these. However I split the field, I have a lot of different ways of splitting the field in half for the quarterback in those 90 percenters, then 5 pure progressions, and then 3 what I call bank plays, which are maybe your basic bread and butter stuff that you will carry no matter what. So you're always, whether the drills that you are set up doing every day. They work on those things. Everybody knows them, right? And back in the old days, the West Coast offense, everybody ran the shallow cross for me. Everybody knew
Yeah.
all the adjustments. So like those kinds of things where they're banked plays, you could get by without having it be a major part of your script in a week because you always practice them.
Yeah, like I mean, defensively, I'm thinking right. We always based and ran 2-read or palms coverage, right? That was always like our day one. We spent so much time running palms that I'm with you. By week 7, if we only took 2 reps of palms and practice that week, per group, we were probably pretty good. Our kids either you knew it by then or you probably weren't going to play. So
Sure,
that's a good point.
sure. So you see kind of like what that is. The runs, four core runs. What are you going to run to win the game? The 4 core runs, and then the way it's slotted out, you have answers. So I've given 2 answers. So that's total 12 slots dedicated to the running game and its answers, right? So I mean, really and truly, these are the hard parts. So as a passing game guy, or someone who was really much more comfortable in the passing game, in my whole life, that dark green part on the far left was the easiest. Oh yeah, we can do this. Boom, 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 knock it out. The really hard part was saying, okay, if I had to limit myself, how would I limit my passing game and still be effective?
Yeah.
So, and that's what this does. All right. So, taking a sample plan. Oh, by the way, as I go into this, just took a generic team, not generic, but pretty good defense that I had in mind. They're a 4-2-5 based team, play a lot of quarters, don't blitz much because they have a penetrating 3 technique. Middle linebacker's a playmaker, active, smart, outside linebacker, nickel, safety type people, and corners who are not that physical, right? So that was the team that I had in my brain when I kind of started doodling with this for this podcast. So a sample plan, right? So once you define all the things that we talk about, you can mold what goes into the practice based on these are the axioms. And so this is actually from our game plan sheet. So the way it's constructed, and I'll show you, I've got screenshots of samples here. There's this is the second or third page tab in the document, and this is where you type out, here are the 5 things that we're going to do to win this game, right? And you can see it's from the thing. So on Sunday, make sure these 5 things are developed and they're the focal points of what you're going to go into your open field thoughts. All right. So talked about having things that are tangible, that really mean something. So like I said, three technique that's killing everybody, right? Now I can predict what they do, and it just seems like this. The really, really good defenses, what they're going to be in, right? I mean, because they're good. I mean, I remember the old great Miami defenses, the University of Miami defenses. You knew what they were going to be in. Their 3 technique was going to be unblockable, right?
Yeah.
And but this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. The first thing is like, you got to protect the offensive line. You had to get the ball out quick. You had to stretch them laterally because you weren't going to knock them back, and you had to make sure you double team that 3 technique. And so this is just one of the things. I have some, really simple, threw them up there examples to give you, but that's one of the things. And so, and that is the backbone. So as you see this, you can't just say, okay, we got our normal quick game. We're going to throw a stop, a slant, and a quick out, and then call it, hey, yeah, we've got a plan for now. Because when you got to play a guy for what we said is 74 plays, if he plays 50 plus plays, you got to find a way to neutralize that guy. And how often do you see it where people just ignore it, especially in the NFL, right? They just ignore this stuff and they get into a big game and they get destroyed by a 4-man pass rush. And so when we say this, we're talking about not just getting the ball out quick, but every pass under that is gone in under 2 seconds. So that is the maximum lifetime of a pass play in that category, right? And then the other stuff falls into place. The second one, we said they got a great Mike linebacker who's all over the field. How are we going to frustrate him, not let him get people, be really involved, get in on tackles, start blowing people up? How are we going to do that? Okay, so we're obviously going to have a lot of what I call ram reads, which is read away from Mike and split the field. Like I said, we have a lot of ways of doing that. We're going to make sure that when we throw into his area, that the matchup is favorable for us. And then, we're going to make him run. We're going to make him tackle in space and test his conditioning, right? And all those things are going to fit under there. Okay. The third is get outside the outside backer nickel. Fast flowing defense, guys that push to matchups really, really quickly and pattern recognize. So how are we going to do that? And I'm not, obviously there's the, swing screens and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about more than that. I'm talking about throwing the football when you're putting in pass plays that you're going to spend working on for the week. These are the things you got to have, and it's got to be purposeful, right? This is in there to do that. And then high percentage potential explosive. So meaning I can throw it relatively easy throw, and how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to put speed number 3. Like I said, that Mike backer's pretty good. They're too high defense a lot of the time. Putting the guy there. I use bunch as a general term, varying splits to get different things that you want, and then making sure that I get leverage on inside breaks, right? And then the fifth one is, vertical reads on the roll down. So isn't it the best thing that we could possibly do is like get a guy who the defense never wants to have you cover deep and make him cover you deep? So if
Absolutely.
we can get that done in certain things because we can predict certain things, then I think that would be, I think that would be beneficial. So now that these things are defined, you can mold what goes into practice and on the sheet based on, and these are the 5 axioms for this, for this game.
And Coach, would you recommend, is this something you're coming up with before you're going into your coaches meeting and getting those assistant coaches, hey, let's think about this process?
Yeah, I think that everybody should bring theirs. I think that your first part of your coaches meeting is saying, I think that the head guy or the guy in charge of that side of the ball probably needs to be the deciding factor. But I always think that people should have like a voice in this. Like, maybe everybody bring their 5 and see really how much
they
it
match.
Is. Yeah.
Coach, I really like that. We, especially at the high school level, right? We always talk about the biggest struggle is, I don't want to like pick on a position, Matt, but maybe I'll pick when I used to coach. Like early
wide
on,
receiver
I was a
coaches,
or like the running back coach, right? Like early on. And I'm not saying they're like a bad coach, but right, they come into the Sunday meeting and they're like, well, the other day we saw the Gators running stretch at a pistol. I think we should do that. And my buddy who's an OC would always be like, yeah, we don't even run pistols. So I don't know where this came from. But I think if instead you said, hey, bring in axioms, that would be a lot better thing that they would focus on. And again, the axioms got to fit into who we are, right? And what makes us successful. I really like that idea of giving that assignment. And hey, listen, if you don't bring in an axiom, you got to be quiet on Sunday. You didn't bring in your job, so we don't want to hear any suggestions from the peanut gallery. So I like that.
Exactly. And you know what, in the business world, and I deal with people on all levels, right? In my day job, do that engagement and keeping people, engagement and buy-in. They're the things that if there's one thing that I could go back and change about my younger self, that would be it. Because I was like, all right, and they were just like, and it happens like that in a lot of high school staffs. A lot of coordinators just sit there, do it all themselves, and everybody just kind of piddles around. Then you get asked a question every now and again, right? But here, I think it's good to have a good, lively discussion. It's really easy to say, okay, they play cover 3. I mean, like, we're going to run 4 verticals and curl flat and go home, right? I mean, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about specific things. And I hope you see that. And I'll get into some things that are
Yeah.
a little bit more specific.
And I think like a specific type is like, hey, right, they run cover 3, but their 3-up player is slow. So like, let's really work on getting that 3 vertical, and that's where we should attack them, right? That would be probably not in those words, but more of an axiom, right?
Of course.
Hey, we know in cover 3 we want to attack this guy.
Yes, exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly. And so yeah, so the way that our thing does, and here's a screenshot of what our game board looks like in our game planning document, right? And so you'll see, on the left-hand column there's the types of plays, that kind of just give me guidelines, and then everything's left hash, right hash. The blue is left hash, the red kind of, I don't know, lighter highlighted colors is the right hash version of it. But anyway, going down this, when we start plugging things in, again, everything on this that we said kind of has to fit into that. But this bleeds into our practice scripts, all right? And then it bleeds into eventually, like, so this is the picture of the back half of the game plan.
Yeah.
Right. And so where I typed in what those axioms are, you see those green bars across the left-hand side. There's a blow up that I'll show you, but this is the back. This is the back page, right? The situation stuff. But this is, instead of having a script, this is what we use. And you can obviously use a script, but it's purposeful. It says which pieces of it, and I'll give you the blow up of it now. Okay. So that's what it says. And here's your 5 axioms. And here are the things. And like I said, you can divide them. It could be 8 things or 10 things. And then another group has 6, goes from 6 to 4, and you flex that way. There's 30 total spots. And this is, this is just kind of an idea. But again, when you're talking about when things are not going good, which is when you need to kind of like amp up your play calling ability, right? This is what am I trying to do? Like, how many times do you see people that are just having a terrible time, and you're just like, what are they doing? What are we doing? Right? That's the question people ask when you watch them. Well, here you go. What are we doing? All right. And so these things can kind of really bring things back into focus. And also, if you got plays that don't fit on here, then they shouldn't be practiced. You need to rearrange your script, right?
Yeah, so I think what I like about this is I'm going to give the version of what it was on my play card and why I agree with yours more. So I'm going to get onto myself here. Right. This version for me was just reminders, right? It was those 4 or 5 big reminders, and it was always in a small section on the bottom right hand of my play card. And when I think back on it, a lot of the times I didn't check my reminders again until like way deep into the game, or at halftime again. I go back to it and I'm always like, why did I take so long to get to this point? Well, I wrote it small and in the bottom right-hand corner. I didn't give it a nice dedicated section like this. And I think that's a big piece of it, Coach, right? If you write something small on your play card, right, games are crazy. It's wild when you're calling the plays. You could miss it. And I really like having that section of, like you said, when things are speeding up too quick and things are going awry, knowing right where to go on my play card. And I think you having that built-in section is so valuable. And it seems simple to say, but look, I can sit here and be like, look, I've made this mistake. I've been scrambling on my play card. My reminders are in the bottom right-hand corner, and I got to call a play, and they're hurry up offense and, and all that. So I love this, Coach. I think this is such a valuable thing for offensive and defensive play callers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's helpful. Like I said, I started doing it, and it just helps bring things back into focus quicker.
Yeah.
And so here so the rest of my slides, Coach, are me going through and like picking, we'll go down these lists: protect OI, minimize number 51. And I've got a couple of examples of things. So, there's obviously 5 more slides, and I got a couple of examples on each slide of kind of what the thoughts would look like stop me, redirect me, however you guys
Yeah.
feel,
Yeah.
and then that's gonna be good. So, so the next thing, okay, so here's a couple of things, right? So, when you start pulling up, so that this is actually the cutout that just popped up there of the game board, and basically, so that for this team, right, that this imaginary team, they're a field defense. We can predict where the three technique is going to be. All right. So, kind of just giving examples of this. I mean, obviously, it's really easy to say, okay, throw quick game, throw, you know, sprint out, throw all your screens and all that crap. But I wanted to give some content that kind of means a little bit more. And so here is, all right. So say we're starting boundary stretch. Obviously, everyone that plays against a quarters defense that plays field loves when they get that kind of look, and then they could run stretch into the boundary towards that shade, right? As long as they can stalemate that defensive end,
Yeah.
they're going to have a good day. This is like the dream of what everybody tries to get to, right? It's the three technique that we're running away from. We'll make sure that we either run away from them or get four hands on him, right? Four eyes on him, and on the way up to the mic on the backside. But so just want to take, just little variations. So like, the first setup that you see there would be, trying to build things to get some kind of rotation, to get some kind of movement, and then build yourself, like a fancy RPO.
Yeah.
Start off with stuff that would be like one incarnation of it. And then you're saying that, the answer play or the keep honest play is something where we go from what we call stretch to steal, which takes backside tackle, locks him on the end. And then you got the RPO. And again, you're controlling the mic. You're still running away from the three technique, that kind of thing. So I know that this is nothing that's like earth shattering or anything like that, but just kind of wanted to go through the process of different means of how, we could then not just dress these things up, but keep plays alive, right? So that when we say we're running boundary stretch, right, this is how we're going to get it. And you can see with the attachments and the formations, kind of how, without getting, it would take so long, but how you get the secondary adjustments, how you control, fulcrum players, all that kind of stuff. And then, you're on the right hand side, you couple of just different answers, right? And I know that this is like really dicey. It looks great until that end comes and just, just runs around the, the same side. Ghost is what we call GH counter. So all of our schemes are, they're all grouped in families. So all the stretch, solid, split zone, those are all S's, all the gap schemes are G's, right? And then you want to be able to, when you do set the back away from him and run to him, you want to probably cut back. There was a guy we played, a long time ago, and it was basically kind of like this, right? And so we call seal, which is split zone. Again, we're blocking the end. We're
Yeah.
facing him, and then aim is an arc, but it's aimed at the inside man. So just kind of knifing through that. Obviously, as you saw on the sheet, there was a lot more answers than that in the passing game. Just kind of, I don't talk about the running game very often, so wanted to get
But Coach, I love the visualization that you've made here. And again, if you're listening, like, we appreciate you listening, but flip on YouTube because some of the best stuff's on there. And really what he did, if you're listening, if you're watching, I apologize for patronizing you, but right, he shows stretch just with the, the 5-man front and the running back, and then he goes to right stretch with an orbit, and then he went to stretch with an RPO off of it, and then stretch with the screen off of it. And I think that's a really good visualization for coaches as well. Coach, between doing that and then you just did GH counter, and then you came back with split zone, and kind of the different ways that you can do exactly what you're talking about. So not only do obviously everything makes sense the way you're building it. I love the visual that you show, and I think it's a great learning tool, not only for young coaches, but also players as well. This can be really valuable for them in teaching young coaches how to build their play sheet and how to build plays off of base plays. So, I love this. Again, I think that this has so many different facets and levels to it for teaching. I think it's a great process, just looking at it from the outside in.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Well, some people have limited time. Coaches really have limited time to spend with their players. And they're always on devices. So these are all good things, right?
Yeah, and better be on a device too, right?
and honestly, all of my consulting is done virtually too. So those things kind of help and build off of each other. So all right. So the next one. So it's not relegated to RAM reads, but these plays I'm going to show you are going to get you a starting point. Just kind of going through. So here was one of them. I know a lot of people run the stick combination this way to trips. Again, what you're saying is they're a quarters team. Are they going to play Stubby? Are they going to how far out of the box is the mic going to go?
Yeah.
For that kind of thing. But also when he does move, even post snap, if he goes and attacks the stick route or the read route for the Y slot, for us, we have coaching points. So this pattern on the right is called roar here because it's a RAM read. Okay. If it was backside and we're telling our quarterback to go front side to backside, roar means RAM read, and it's a basic and an option route. That's what that means. But bore means it's a backside route, meaning we would say, in different things, go front side to backside. So that's kind of how we are able to, communicate that. So the coaching point there is it goes from a square cut in to a speed cut in for that inside basic runner. Now, because it speeds it up, right? I had a quarterback that played for me, and then got through his playing day, loved the RAM reads, and then he's done playing, and he was like, I was never comfortable with those things. And it was like, breaking your heart, one of your favorite things. And it was just like, well, and he was like, well, we'd run stick and levels on the backside, and I felt like I was always waiting on the dig route. Mike move, and I was always waiting. And so, taking that feedback, wish you would have told me then, right? But then you speed cut that thing, it's back in. And this is kind of, if you watch half the glances that are thrown in the NFL, they look like crappy dig routes anyway. So,
so it's kind of how dealing with the offensive guys I deal with. That's what a lot of them don't even. They just tell them like, get to space. They're like, just bend it to space. I don't even care anymore. Yeah. And that's kind of what it's turned into. But I obviously get it, right? Like, get to the green grass and give the quarterback an alley to throw.
Yeah. So, working on leverages, obviously, I like it in the boundary because you have that boundary safety. That B guy you have a chance of him being wider, especially if you run a lot of smash, which we do, so anyway, but you get across him and all that kind of stuff, but you have more room to make Mike work. And then another example of it is the same kind of read, a lot of different presentation, and you got a slant option by the Y. The Y in this offense is the best player. So he's the best receiver, right? And so what you're doing is out of a different look, giving really the same thing. You've got the option route by the Y receiver, and you're throwing away from the drop of the mic and doing the same thing. You got a backside high-low, and the relationships are the same as the quarterback's eyes move into receivers, right? So you got a basic and an option. It's the same thing, even though you're repping it differently, right? Then you get the same kind of principles. And what you're doing is you're putting pictures in the quarterback's brain over and over and over again. And that's really the key to people learning how to anticipate and being able to process information is you put that, it's just like when you were young and you were a good baseball player, you would see a good fastball. And then what happens is they get too fast for you. But when you're hitting well, you know exactly what the position of the ball was when you hit it. and when you hit it well. And so it's the same kind of thing, right? So that is, just a couple of examples of what we're going to do to get the mic moving, that aren't like just screens and stretching them laterally and stuff like that. All right, so the third thing is getting outside the nickel. All right, and so brought in a couple of things that are kind of basic. And the funny thing is, so this first one on the left, it's actually, that used to be a day one install. Defensive guys hated it, right? You'd be in bunch, then you'd motion out, outside of him, being a 6-man protection still. But in the old days, the way I learned flanker drive and the way I learned shallow cross was that when you could get the backside outside backer, so that W right there, when you can get him reduced down, you could get outside of him, and that was the best hit of all when you could do that.
Yeah.
And you're still in a 6-man protection, right? So even though you're empty, you're getting a lot of things. If you call it in the first, second, play of the game, or somewhere in the first series, you're going to know what their bunch check's going to be for at least one of them for the game, right? It gives you a lot of things, and then it doesn't matter what the bunch check was. And then you're kind of protected. If they're going to spin weak and that boundary safety is going to spin down to come capture the drag route, then you protecting him a little bit with the glance, right? So obviously pretty simple, but these are things that why is it in the game plan, right? If they played static 4-4, and there's a wide outside backer there, then it shouldn't be in there just because it was good 2 weeks ago, right? And so that's the point of it. And the other one is again another one that's pretty basic. We run a lot of, this is the best way to run smash now, in my opinion, right? Another thing is you get in a bunch, right? You can find out what their check is, or they traffic it, and if they play traffic to it, then the Z takes 2 guys, and then you've got a corner route, and then that what we call an Oscar. That's flask is a flag and an Oscar. All right, and an Oscar is an option, but you're reading the corner. Okay, an option reads the outside backer of the nickel, just like the letters say, and Omaha reads the mic. All right, so basically it's a stop route. If as this Y releases outside, that corner is low, he's just going to turn around and stop, turn away from him, right? If he bails, then he's got the free access to the out. All these things are saying is, what am I doing? I'm trying to get outside the defense, because what did we say? Get outside the outside linebackers. We said their corners weren't very physical. So you're probably not going to, you're the risk reward kind of thing. It's not like you're going to run in a Ronnie Lott out there and then your guy's never going to run a shallow cross again, right? So these are the kinds of things where how can I create some kind of explosive without a really, really hard throw, right? As I went through this and I put this plan together, I was like, oh, I got a pretty good smart quarterback, decent athlete. You'll run him a little bit, but not too much. He's not a 5-star, right? But can make throws. And so these are the kinds of things that I think that, these are the kinds of things that popped into my head in just a show. But again, just kind of giving food for thought as we go through this. All right, so high percentage explosives, right? Wanted to give away, like we said, talked about having speed at 3, using formation contraction, and again giving leverage on inside cuts, right? So you see in a couple of these things. On the left-hand side, you got a pattern that's called soar. So if it's a bore, then it's backside. He's going front side away from it, and he's scanning his eyes into it. If it's roar, he's reading the mic. If it's soar, he's reading that boundary safety. It's the number of so it's a 1 high, 2 high read. And so I know it's quarters, but if that boundary safety spins inside the hash, we're treating it as 1 high, and we're high, low, and will, right? If he stays outside of it, then we're treating it as 2 high. And then you've got 3 running vertical against the Mike. And that's what we said. That was one of the things we were talking about. A guy, your best guy against their Mike, he might be good, but he's a Mike linebacker. And so, that kind of thing, to where you are creating space, but also, as you can see from these examples, hopefully, there's a lot of very, very similar, just like things. All right. And then we're being really careful about what we rep and how we bring the quarterback's eyes into things. And so we're creating, more of these types of situations where we feel like it is a good play. You got a 6-man, you got an empty with an H-back attached. So, maybe the answer isn't just that they're just going to automatically come blitz it. There is some running game that's available, that kind of thing. You can always bring the ball, people bring the back into the backfield and run it. So it's not a predetermined, they're just going to, play cover 0 automatically.
Yeah, sling it.
Yeah. And then the next one's just an example, hey, they play Stubby, and it could be a couple different ideas, right? They could play traffic, but I'm really seeing a lot of the big hits on dig routes are some kind of thing like this, where they make a guy play outside leverage by the responsibilities he's given.
This is dirty,
right? You're running dagger.
Look, I'm a guy we run Stubby my entire career, Coach. It's our base trips install. This beats it. I just, like you said, that guy's going to work out to the outside leverage nickel, and then he's going to come break in on the dagger. And that guy is, unless our nickel's just better than your guy, we're screwed here.
Correct.
Right. Because our Mike's going to end up on this back checking down, right? He's gonna work back and then see the vision of the back and work forward. So it's right. This is tough.
Right. So, so that's just something, like we said, and these are not like, hey, you don't save this for the 3rd and 13 play. It might be your 3rd and 13 play, but it should be somewhere in there. And like we're saying, hey, I need an explosive. Like they're tackling me where I'm catching it, and they're playing really well, and we're just missing, give me something breaking back into the quarterback, where it's and give us a chance to hit one to one of our good guys. And so that kind of thing is just an example of that, right? So, and then the last section, and here's kind of more of the same kind of thing. So in its base, the 3x1. So I changed the way I run vertical reads, and the way I run 4 verts is the way I really got experience seeing people in the Bryles tree do the thing that way, where you've got the go, the glance, or the deep trace, and then they just had more options. They just did. But changing the way that instead of crossing that Y all the way to the other hash, which is great but versus cover 3, but not really great versus everything else, giving him, so again, you're going to get, if you do get that kind of look, you will pry the guy. And now, even if they're static, right, that nickel, he's really a flat defender. He's really the cover 2 outside, outside leverage hard corner. And now he's responsible for the vertical read, with the safety being evaporated from him. So, creating those kinds of things for your guy. And then, just one more, something that's really cool about the way we name our stuff. Like, we have suffixes. So all the takeoffs of everything is either an ER, which is end rail, or an ING, and the suffix. So fin is your corner is flagging an in, right? So that 3 receiver surface, you've seen it, 2 5-yard ends in the corner route. Finning tells that inside guy and go. So now, again, everything that begins with an S word, the left-hand pattern, stove is a stop and a vertical, but it's an S word, so it's a single high beater. So if that boundary safety goes inside the hash, you're working that side. If he stays outside of it, then again, you got something against the mic again. And, he's an active player. He's going to recognize patterns. He's going to see the 5-yard under, right, and go attack it. And then hopefully you can get, some kind of play on it. So, right. So, these
This is coach. Just quit showing everyone Stubby beaters night. I'm gonna have to take the coverage out of the playbook. Because I can tell you right, like our Mike is the post 3 player. He's going to go and post this great, but we teach him once you hit that hip pocket, you got to get your eyes back to the quarterback. That dude's going to take off on him. And then Mike's going to run to the sideline and go, Coach, where did I mess up? And I'm going to say, that's my fault. I called the wrong coverage.
Right. And so, I mean, really the thing is like the boundary safety rotates over the top with the eyes, right? But if my eyes are on him and I can hit that seam route in quick rhythm because he rotates away from me, we changed landmarks too. That's the biggest thing in our vertical game. The inside vertical for me is now 3 yards inside the numbers instead of 2 yards outside the hash. It makes
What's the
it
reasoning
harder.
for that, Coach?
The angle is much different. Well, came about it 3 years ago, studying everybody's 4 verts. Everyone was breaking off 4 verts, like, and the teams that were getting it on accident, because like a tight end would keep seam releasing. They'd be in a one back with a tight end in the boundary and 2 wides to the field out of 11 personnel. And he would get stretched out there, but he'd be open in that seam. And it's like I overlaid all the cut-ups of the explosives that I got where they actually got the seam thrown, and he was closer to the numbers than he was the hash. And then you start watching 21 or 20, Josh Heupel's first year at Tennessee. Watch the Alabama game. The boundary safety, and they're all NFL players, right, on that field. Their landmarks were just different, and they couldn't get to that point.
Yeah, when they have those wide hashes, right, you can't, or those wide splits, right?
Yeah.
At some point, either you got to play your safeties over there, and now your overhangs are in limbo, or you got to play your overhangs further out and leave your safety semi more in limbo, right? Because you got to have that extra run fitter on the edge at some point. So I'm with you. Yeah, I mean it's that weird kind of gray area. So it makes sense, and you've obviously done the research, so you probably know it better than me. But I can definitely see that.
So all the other ones, they're pretty much regular. There are things obviously where you play with splits and things like that, but definitely that boundary vertical read, if you can get it there. I mean, and it doesn't just tax you where you just need a guy. You either need guys that are GoDaddies, or you need a guy with a cannon, right? And I mean, obviously there's kids like that out there, but it's within the context of being able to still throw on time and all that kind of stuff. So that was the end of my last slide. So I just wanted to kind of show you kind of how these things kind of do. And like I said, these are a few groups, but we did that all within the context of 5 split the fields, 5 dropbacks, and then 3 banks, right? And then you're working it to where you're going to cover up and make sure that all your situations are covered. Obviously, I didn't cover 2-point plays or anything like that, but then you should have something that you can execute. And then at the worst case, you should have something that at least makes sense as to why are we doing this? Well,
yeah,
and I think it's important that that we have that.
Coach, I love this stuff. I always tell people the best part of doing this podcast is, one day I am going back to coaching. I've said that pretty prevalently. I'm not doing it right now, but at some point I'm gonna be back on a sideline. And I love when I talk with coaches, over the past, Matt, we'll be doing this 2 years now. Are we going on 2 years?
Yeah, in our second year. Yeah.
In our second season here, episode 17 or 18 or whatever this is going to be. And it's just, Coach, when I get something and I'm like, look, this is automatically going in. Like, I don't even have to review the podcast to say this is something I'm going to do. And I love podcasts like this. And if you're listening, I know you don't have to always take our advice, but man, if you're not doing something very similar to what Coach said, I really think you're leaving something off the table going into game planning of just that focus. Like you said, Coach, especially in the part of the game, because we've all been there when we have that oh shit moment, the part of the game, or what am I going to call, or things have just gotten a little too crazy of like, okay, here's my feel good zone. Let's go back to the things that we know we need to execute that are going to fit within those 5 reasons why we're going to win the game. And I just, you explain it a lot better than me, Coach. I kind of gave the renegade version of that, but I just love this, Coach. It's awesome. Matt?
I mean, I'm going to echo what you said. This automatically goes on the game planning sheet. And, what was going through my head through this is, how do you, looking at those axioms, how do you find plays that, could meet multiple axioms that you could get the most value out of, and trying to find those value plays that, hey, we can approach this, with one concept or, have 3 different concepts going on at once and attack it with one play,
Sure,
but,
absolutely.
that's all. This makes perfect sense. And, it fits right into game planning because like Coach Bradburn said, we've all been there where it seems like, you punt on 4th down and you're staring at your play call sheet going, what do I do now? What do I do now? And you have that little section on the back that just has some ideas, but going into this with the ideas laid out, hey, what do we want to attack? How are we going to attack it? And is this working? Makes it a lot easier to evaluate as you move on through the game.
And it should, like you said, there's 30 spots. I mean, how many plays, right? You're not going to have that many open field plays.
Correct.
You will have enough, and it also lets you judge, right? I mean, the number one. So if like that number one piece of it, like protect the O line, if that was the shortest one, and that 3 technique is going to beat you up, right? Then that's not a very good plan. Right? I mean, like if you don't have answers for it, and so there's contingencies, and I think the design of the offense needs to be to where say they play a lot more spin coverage than quarters, then you're going to be okay, right? I mean, but I think the things that we showed kind of give answers, but anyway.
No, I love it. So, Coach, we ask everybody the tough questions at the end. We ask everybody that comes on the show. All right, you have a lot of years experience in football. So maybe you have a great answer. You don't have to give the specific team or anything, but we always ask every coach that comes on, what's the most unique or interesting thing that a team that you've been a part of does that no other team does? This can be a culture thing, can be a football thing, whatever. So we're going to ask you that, Coach. What's the most unique thing that you've been a part of? Whether it's tradition or culture or an event or, anything really.
Man, I played at Texas, so everything was great, right? So no,
This is always a tough one, so we always save it to the end.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell a little bit of story, and I always regretted that I was a few years older. I got to know Mac Brown after I graduated. My position coach was like his right hand guy, right? And so like I could come back. I ended up knowing those guys. Coach Davis, the offense coordinator, Coach Brian, of course, was like a second dad to me, and I got to know I got to know them a lot better than my coaches that I played for when I was at Texas. And one thing that they always did, I never doubted how well they recruited, because we had a kid who was pretty good, and they ended up offering him, right. But I brought him down for to come to a camp and all that kind of stuff. Everybody knew me. Every GA, the lady doing name tags, Coach Brown's wife. I'm talking like would come up, strength coaches would come up and go, "Hey, I heard blah 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 blah. I heard you were good on bench." I mean, like like arcane things that nobody ever knew, and so that was pretty unique. I don't know what it's like now, because I'm obviously but for everybody in that building to know everything, I mean, like really, really cool things. And then, so the kid actually decommitted, then decommitted from Texas. It was a big, whatever. He ended up actually playing for me later on, and so that was really good. But I'm checking out of the hotel in Miami at the AFCA, Coach Brown's in front of me. And this is like 7 or 8 years later. Turns around, knows everything about, like, he didn't have to introduce himself to me. Like, he shook my hand. How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Man, I can't. And everything, he remembered every detail of everything, including where I had been in the 7 or 8 years since the last time I'd seen him.
Yeah. Wow.
Kind of thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. But the way they had, like, Mrs. Brown knowing stuff about me, like, that was the way they prepared people on that was just, they really did a good, and it shows, and it's why everybody that played for him loves him, so.
Yeah, look, Coach, I think that's a great example. And first off, I'm going to preface this entire thing by saying Mac Brown, he's a great Florida State alum, so go Noles. But that was something I've been around a lot of good programs and a lot of good coaches in my day, and I think that's another great piece. If you're a high school coach listening, maybe you're new going into a program and stuff, take the time to meet and learn the alumni and learn things about them and things of that nature. And I think that's a great point I got from that story is, know the past people that have been there. You want to get welcome real quick at a new school when you're a new coach. Learn a few of the alum, be polite to them, chat with them, because then they're going to go to the other. Oh, this new coach is great. He already knew who I was. He introduced himself. He talked to me about this, all that good stuff. And Coach, just like you said, you left there probably being a lifelong Mac Brown fan. I mean, I know you're a Texas guy regardless, but you're probably like, Coach was awesome, this and that, and how polite they were and they knew everything. And I think it's just one of those things. It just leaves you, like you said, leaves a good taste in your mouth and really puts on a good show. And that's such a small thing in coaching that you can do. That's just taking the time to get to know people. It's simple.
I think it's a really lost thing that high school coaches are a lot like that. I mean, in a lot of the best case situations, they are. A lot of high school coaches go out of their way for kids that they like. But the thing of it was that I was not gonna really benefit them. They were just kind of being good folks. But if we could be like that to all of our players, that's the one thing that I was, I had a flaw, right? When I said I was a young coach, right? I was a lot nicer to the really good players than the players that were like me. But I would, if I just think that, like, I think about that a lot. So that is something pretty cool.
I'm with you, Coach. I talk about all the time. When I was a young coach, I was fiery. I probably cussed too much. I was way too hard on certain kids. And now, like I said, as I got older and I became a head coach, and now that I'm a father, the relationships are what I miss the most. So why didn't I spend the most time building them? And I think that's the best retrospect, being out of it for 3 years, being like, well, what do I miss so much about coaching? Why do I really want to go back? It's like, man, I miss being with the guys. I miss being with the kids. I miss talking ball. I miss hearing about their lives and their success stories and how they did on their math test. And then I'm like, that I miss relationships. So if I ever go back, which again I am, like, I better build relationships, and that better be on the forefront of my mind. So that's a great story here at the end, and I love that, Coach. So, Coach, appreciate you coming on the Board Drill night. As always, I think this was such a great topic. I think a lot of coaches are going to get a lot out of it. Do you mind if I share your Twitter where people can reach out if they have any questions?
Absolutely.
It's Coach Dan _Gonzalez 16. If you want to reach out to Coach, you can probably DM him on Twitter. If you're a bashful coach and you want to email us, we'll be happy to pass along your question to Coach. He's awesome. Like I said, I met him when I literally just tweeted out who wants to talk ball tonight, and he reached out to me. Really, really awesome thing. So, Coach, thanks for coming on the Board Drill tonight. We loved having you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.